Hello my dear viewers, in this video we are narratively explaining about the life and achievements of Shiva devotee Jedara Dasimayya. Let us start. Introduction. In the land of Karnataka, where the red soil clings to the bare feet and rivers carved path through the ancient hills, a whisper passed from mouth to mouth, centuries to century, that there once lived a weaver who wove more than cloth. That weaver was Jedara Dasimayya, a man of cotton and silence, whose fingers shaped not only the garments for the body, but words that clothed the soul. The Jedara Dasimayya lived in the time when the gods were locked in the temples and scriptures were guarded by the caste. But Dasimayya, born in the humble community of weavers, did not seek truth in rituals or a Sanskrit of scholars. He found it in breath, in labor, in the very thread that passed through his fingers. With no crown on his brow, no formal guru with scrolls, Dasimayya became one of the earliest Vachanakaras, the poet saint of Karnataka, whose words blazed with the fire of direct ritualization and the direct realization. His vachanas were short, spontaneous utterance of mystical insight, defiant in tone, lyrical in soul. They shook the wall of orthodoxy and laid the early foundation for what would later erupt as Veerashaiva movement, the Lingayata movement. This is the story of man who walked barefoot across the edge of the customs, who saw God not in a stone but in self, who called out to Shiva not in a Sanskrit chants but in the raw, unadorned tongue of the people. So, this is the story of Jedara Dasimayya, the weaver who wove the infinite. Birth and early life. Dasimayya was born in Mudanur B village, Surapura Taluk, Yadagiri district, Karnataka state, India. Village nestled within the heart of what is now Karnataka. His family belongs to the Jeda caste, which means traditional weavers who spun thread from cotton and dyed it in the colors. His father was Ramaya and his mother was Shankari. His father was a stoic man who believed in silence and steadiness. His mother was more expressive, her voice often rising in rustic hymns to Shiva as she ground grains or lit the evening lamp. From the moment he could walk, Dasimayya was around the loom, the sound of the shuttle, the pull of the thread, and hiss sound of the dye pot. These were the sounds of his childhood. Weaving was not just a labor, it was discipline, concentration, and the rhythm. Yet, even as his hands learned to craft cloth, his eyes drifted to other things, the shape of clouds, the flicker of the light through the trees. From young age, on trip to the nearby towns to deliver the clothes, he encountered a wandering Shaiva mendicant seated beneath the banyan tree near the roadside shrine. A man wore no fine clothes, carried no possessions beyond a begging bowl, and Ishtalinga tied around his neck. His body was smeared with the vibhuti, which means sacred ash, and his eyes shone with the inner light. Drawn to him, Dasimayya approached and offered water. The mendicant looked at him and said only this statement: Shiva is not a far weaver, he resides, he rides your breath, look inside. That single sentence cracked open something inside Dasimayya. It was not a philosophy, it was recognition. From that day, his hunger for truth became unbearable. He left home. Some says he went into the forests, others says he wandering from temple to temple seeking the teachers or gurus. Eventually, he found a preceptor who initiated him into Veerashaivism, giving him the Ishtalinga, which is small symbolic representation of Shiva to be worn and worshipped on the body and within the self. For Dasimayya, it was not just an object, it became the excess of his entire being. flame for all. Dasimaya returned to his village, but he was no longer the same. He was married with a Duggale, who is also devotee of Shiva. The loom still stood, the cotton still arrived, but now every moment of weaving became an act of worship. His vachanas began to emerge, not composed, but were born. The simplicity stunned those who heard them. No metaphors, no scriptures, just raw experiences. Dasimaya was giving a voice to the truth that bypassed the tradition. He soon became a voice for voiceless, for women, for the lower castes, for the laborers who had always been told that God was beyond their reach. His vachanas thought that work is worship, that truth is personal, and that Shiva dwells within, not in rituals or Brahmanical authority. He rejected caste hierarchies outright. The Vachana awakening. Dasimaya did not write his poems with the ink. He spoke them on roadsides, in country yards, at wells where women gathered, and during the conversation with the fellow villagers. His vachanas were oral, direct, uncompromising, and born from insight rather than scholarship. He rejected ornate language, Sanskrit privilege, and the metaphysical abstraction. His speech was plain, but charged each word a spark. It was radical democratization of divinity. For centuries, the language of liberation had been locked in Sanskrit, chanted by the Brahmins behind rituals barriers. Dasimaya unlocked that door. He said, "Speak in your own tongue, pray in your own way, find the divine in your breath, find the divine in your sweat, find the divine in your struggle." He preached the following points. First one, the Ishtalinga was not a symbol but an inner truth. Second one, caste and gender had no bearing on one's capacity for realization. Third one, work, especially manual labor, was a form of sadhana, which means spiritual discipline. Fourth one, rituals, if mechanical, were worthless. If rituals are performed without concentration or consciousness, they become worthless. This was not just poetry, it was start of Veerashaiva or Lingayata revolution. And yet Dasimaya remained rooted. He continued weaving. To him, spinning thread was no less sacred than meditating in a forest. He sanctified the ordinary, a theme that would become central to the later Vachana movement. His followers began to grow. Farmers, potters, washermen, even some disillusioned temple priests began listening. A few became his disciples. He did not found an order or ashrama. His ashrama was wherever the truth was spoken. His disciples were those who had tasted the fire of longing. As the Dasimaya teachings spread, some tried to shame him, some ignored him, but others engaged him in a public debate. But he remained celibate, disciplined, and simple. His home was open to all. He shared food with those the orthodox deemed untouchables. His very life became a protest, not with the slogans, but with a silent fire of presence. Dasimaya began to use spinning and the weaving as the central metaphors in his poetry. The looms become a symbol of divine unity. Threads, when woven together, form a cloth. When separated, they are weak. The metaphors extended to society, unity through the realization, not division through dogma. Next main point is the silent revolt. Jedara Dasimayya did not call for the overthrow of religion. He reclaimed it from priests, rituals, temples, and returned it to the people. It was a silent revolt against hierarchies, against the separation between sacred and secular, and against the notion that only the learner could attain the divine. He thought that the Ishtalinga, when worn with the awareness, was both the reminder and the living center of the divine. But more importantly, It was to be realized, not just carried. Without experience, the symbol was dead. As his followers grew, he was accused of heresy by orthodox factions. He did not argue, he simply bowed and continued his work. In time, his village transformed. Men and women from different castes began praying together. Some discarded rituals, some kept them but added inward practice. Dasimayya taught them to see Shiva not just in a fire or an image but in a labor, love and the linga within, which means Ishtalinga. The depth of silence. As the years passed, Dasimayya entered a phase of mature stillness and his vachanas took on an even deeper clarity. The fire of rebellion gave way to the glow of non-dual realization, not merely a critic of society, but the lived experience of Shiva consciousness. He began speaking less frequently, but when he did, his words stunned. His disciples began recording his vachanas orally, memorizing them and passing them like a sacred flames from heart to heart. Though most of his contemporaries were still bound by external practice, Dasimayya teachings turned increasingly inward towards silence, self-awareness, and the intimate dance of God and soul. The loom is still. As Dasimayya aged, he continued to weave, but his weaving was now sparse, more meditative than productive. Those who visited would often find him in a meditation, the Ishtalinga pressed against his chest. One morning, as the story goes, his breath slow and steady. He simply stopped. His final days were marked by deep silence. He gave no farewell speech, no parting instructions. Some says he smiled as if saying something others could not. Some says his breath simply merged into the space like a whisper returning to its source. His disciples gathered quietly, no elaborate rite, just ash scattered across the field of cotton, and the loom stood still. Next main point is the Vachanas lives on. Jedara Dasimayya left no ratings, but his Vachanas lived on by the followings. First one, passed down by disciples. Second one, memorized by the wandering ascetics. Third one, eventually written down by the later Veerashaiva compilers or Lingayata compilers or Vachana compilers. Over a time, he came to be regarded as one of the foundational figure of the Veerashaiva movement or Lingayata movement, along with one of the foundational figure of the Vachana movement, along with the later Shiva devotees like Sri Basavanna, Allama Prabhu, Akka Mahadevi, Channa Basavanna, etc. Jedara Dasimayya had no formal role in establishing Lingayatism, but he laid its philosophical and devotional groundwork by the followings. First one, inner experience over outer rituals. Second one, equality across caste and gender. Third one, labor as a sacred. Fourth one, direct realization of Shiva as a self. His influence shaped the Bhakti revolution in Karnataka and beyond. Saints in Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra and North India echoed his principles, though under different names. Finally, conclusion. The Jedara Dasimayya was the eternal weaver. Even today, weavers whisper his name. Jedara Dasimayya never sought to be remembered. He did not carve his name into the stone or seek discipleship with the kings. His only tools were handloom and a heart burning for Shiva, and the courage to speak the truth as he lived it. 10 centuries have passed and still his vachanas are sung, which means still his handloom echoes. The Jedara Dasimayya not only weave a cotton cloth, but he also interweaves the Shiva devotion and reverence with the inner realization. So, Jedara Dasimayya was the weaver of infinite, and the eternal weaver of inner realization. Thank you.